Please welcome Nazanin Ash.
The opportunity to work and learn, the freedom to make choices about your own life and your children's future. This is what's denied to the growing number of people around the world fleeing violence, persecution, and climate disasters. We've treated this crisis like it cannot be solved. Governments are overwhelmed by the challenge, constrained by capacity, resources, and politics. In the United States, our systems for receiving refugees had not modernized in over 40 years, even as the number of people displaced quintupled. With limited solutions, people in crisis are taking dangerous journeys and facing uncertain outcomes, living on the fringes of society. The pressures on receiving communities and the weaponization of the crisis has polarized our politics and threatens to undermine our democracy. Globally, you can draw a line from unmanaged migration to the erosion of human rights and rise of authoritarian regimes. But that's not the whole story, and it's not going to be our story. You might be surprised to hear that in less than 3 years, over 2 million Americans have privately sponsored over 700,000 newcomers to come to the United States. They paid for flights. They secured housing and jobs and helped enroll kids in school, investing their own resources to ensure newcomers thrived. You might be surprised to learn that this outcome was driven by our coalition of 40 major companies and over 500 civic partners. We worked with the US government to help design programs that would allow Americans to serve as private sponsors, and then leverage the innovations of the private sector and our communities to scale. It's been described as one of the most impactful public-private partnerships of the 21st century. You might be surprised that the people who are welcoming represent every part of our great nation. From Unity, Wisconsin, where farmers Bryce and Maxine welcomed the Natyuks to their town of 400, where the local librarian does double duty as the English teacher, and where Ukrainian borscht is now served with Wisconsin cheddar. To Marie in Miami, who fled Haiti as a young woman and then sponsored Berlange, whose story mirrored her own. To Mariah, a veteran who served in Afghanistan and welcomed Latifa, who's now finishing her medical certification and raising her children as Texans. At Welcome.us, our mission is to unleash Americans' capacity and willingness to welcome. We do it not by asking their opinions, but by asking them to help. A call to service Americans have always answered. It turns out we found not just a willingness to welcome, but maybe even the keys to our own national healing in our divided times. You may be surprised to see how quickly this transformation is taking place. This is what our national capacity to welcome looks like when it's limited to what government can do alone. In 2021, the year we launched, this system welcomed just 11,400 refugees. Whole swaths of the country are untouched by welcoming. This is the nation we are building now. This year, the US will welcome 500,000 newcomers through safe, orderly, legal pathways. That's 50 times more than just 3 years ago. In 12,000 zip codes across all 50 states, Sponsors are proving that they have the giant hearts, the open arms, and the generosity to welcome. It's a solution to what the migration challenge demands and what our country needs for its own productive future. Welcomers found that by changing someone's life, they profoundly changed their own, reconnecting with their neighbors, revitalizing their communities, and re-inspired by American ideals of extending freedom and opportunity to the next generation of new Americans. I'd say that's what's working. When we look around, we see solutions, not crises. I hope you see the same and join our welcoming movement. Thank you.
Please welcome Dr. Chelsea Clinton, Dr. Montgomery Rice, and First Lady Jill Biden.
Thank you so much. It's really just an extraordinary honor for me to be on stage with two women that I admire so deeply. Dr. Biden, starting with you, I know you and President Biden last November really decided to make women's health a priority of the Biden administration. And earlier this year announced kind of the $100 million sprint for women's health through ARPA-H, kind of the largest new investment of dollars into women's health in a generation or longer. You know, why did you decide this had to be a priority of the administration? What hopes do you have for this greater focus, and what's next?
Well, I have high hopes. You know, women are living longer, but that means women are living longer with chronic pain. And so I think, I don't know, Chelsea, when my friends get together, or my sisters and I, you know, we sit there and we talk about health. And we provide one another with answers. Because really, I think that, you know, we're always asking, like, what supplements are you taking? Or, you know, what do you do if your hair is falling out? Or so many different questions, because we don't have answers. And I can remember when I was in my 40s and, you know, I went to my gynecologist and said, and, you know, at that time they were talking about hormone therapy. And so I said, well, should I take hormone therapy? Should I not? You know, there's this whole thing on breast cancer, whether, you know, it promotes it or hinders it. And so the doctor looked at me and she said, well, what do you want to do? And I thought, what do I want to do? You know, like, you're the gynecologist, you should be telling me the answers. But she didn't have the answers. And I think that's so true today. You know, I don't think, because research has been based mainly on men and, you know, men's bodies and what men need. And so I don't think we realize that really the issue of heart health, how many women, you know, die of heart health, or that Alzheimer's affects women more than it does men. Same with MS, same with autoimmune diseases. So I took this to Joe, and I said, Joe, we have to do something about this. You know, we just don't have the research, we just need the answers. So Joe said, okay, and that's when he started, Chelsea, the ARPA-H, and came up with $100 million and to fund the research. And so that was going to prioritize ovarian health and everything that's all the diseases associated with menopause. And then it studied chronic conditions like arthritis and migraines and why women were getting these conditions. So then the National Institute of Health got on board, and they said, hey, we want to be a part of this. And so they put in $200 million because they wanted to study menopause and how it affects our brain health, our heart health, our bone health. And so they were working on that. But finally, and the reason I'm so glad that you invited me here today, is this big announcement. So the Department of Defense has now committed $500 million to women's health, to women in the service, which then transcends to all women. And so I'm so excited about that. And so now this money is going to study arthritis and chronic fatigue and cardiovascular health. So anyway, it's a big deal, and it's about time. So we're going to get moving on this.
It is a big deal, and it is well past the time, but we're only at this time because of just the extraordinary leadership of you and the president. And you, Dr. Montgomery Rice, one of the things you and I have talked about extensively in different conversations over the years kind of is the inequity in clinical research.
Yes.
Right? It wasn't until the NIH Reauthorization Act of 1993, and to give one man credit, my dad, for signing it, that required trials that were receiving NIH funding to include women in an equitable manner. It wasn't until my mom was in the Senate that legislation was passed to require pediatric trials to include children. And so we know this is history that isn't that old. And yet, even with kind of different legislation and different regulations, we know clinical trials are still not reflective of the population. What do you think the consequences are of this as someone who's really dedicated her life to health equity in action? And what do you think we need to do about it now?
Well, first let me say thank you to your parents for having the foresight to understand that advocacy is about really creating policy, right, that creates sustainability. And the Office of Research in Women's Health was a big deal. Dr. Vivian Penn led it admirably with really making sure that we started to have basic conversations about, even when you're doing mouse studies, should you use female and male mice? Something very basic, but initially, no one really thought about that, about the physiological and the biochemical things that were happening at the cellular level that really would impact drug, metabolism, all different types of things. And so we really had to really go way back and deep into the process to understand how to make a difference. When you think about why the inequities exist, there are multiple reasons. When we think about women's health, we have to think about it more holistically. It is way beyond our reproductive health. Yeah. It is way beyond just menopause. There are some, you think about adolescence, you think about the things that happen in those first couple of years of your cycle, or your nutritional balance at that time, which will clearly influence your cycle because your estrogen levels are everywhere. Your estrogen levels start to fluctuate even throughout your reproductive cycle. Then when you get to the end where you don't have estrogen anymore, right, where it starts to significantly decrease, then you start to see the consequences of that. So we have to think about lifespan changes that are happening. And the only way that we will be able to understand those to introduce interventions are to include women in the studies. And to include women in the studies early on from a preventive mindset. Then as we start to see disease processes and we think about drugs and other opportunities that can be created, then we must include women so that we can understand the differences. Now, we also though have to think about the social determinants. What are the things that we have to really be considerate of that will allow people to participate in a clinical trial? That starts with the trial design. that starts with who are going to be the investigators. I always think about when I was at the University of Kansas, I was the only African-American person on the faculty in the Department of OBGYN, and I started the Clinical Research Center there. And in starting that Clinical Research Center, the couple of things that I figured out when I was going to do studies with birth control pills or menopause studies was that I needed a clinical research nurse that looked like the people who we were going to be recruiting. Because that's where the trust began. Who that person was who was going to be going out into that community saying, would you participate in this trial? And then when they came into the center to see themselves in participating in this trial, did they actually see themselves? Did they see other people that looked like them? Did we speak at a level, right, that they could understand? And did we ensure that they understood that they had choice? That they were not a patient at that point, that they were a subject, okay? And they had a choice. And so that inclusive process allowed us at the University of Kansas to have the highest enrollment of people of color in birth control trials. We're looking at third generation progesterones, or the SWAN study, or other studies where we were looking at the impact of medications on menopause. And I think it was because we thought about the study design, and we thought about who would be the participants in helping us to enroll the right people in the trials. So we were inclusive from the beginning.
You know, Dr. Biden, I was listening to the audience reactions when you were talking about things like Alzheimer's or autoimmune diseases that disproportionately affect women, and I got the sense that there may be people here who didn't know that. And so I wonder, with kind of this major push from the administration, with thankfully the extraordinary announcement today of the $500 million of DoD funding, what do you hope the effects are of this new infusion of not only investment but interest and focus of the U.S. government to be beyond health? How do you hope it'll shape the conversation, inform the conversation, broaden the conversation? So it's not just you and your friends, but hopefully all of us.
No, all of us. I think women are really hungry for this kind of knowledge. At least that's what I'm finding as I travel the country. And we don't have the answers. And actually, women, we lose here in the United States $1.8 trillion a year. It was billion dollars a year, due to the loss of working time because women don't go to work due to menopause. So they either have insomnia and they don't sleep all night, they get migraines, whatever it is, they're aching, their joints or osteoporosis or whatever it is. And just this morning, I have to give you an example. I was watching the morning news, and one of the newscasters was giving the news, and all of a sudden she was just kept talking. All of a sudden she's going like this, and I thought to myself, you don't even know you're doing that. And and so it affects us all, that we really need answers. And so I think it's going to then add more money into our economy for women to work, to go to work, because they can't, because sometimes it's so debilitating.
And to help normalize the conversations around women's health, right? So that they're not just happening in quiet corners with groups of friends, but hopefully on stages like this one and in places like this.
Yeah. Yes.
I wonder, Dr. Montgomery Rice, how you think about this also as the head of a medical school. How do you think about training the next generation of clinicians and people like you who are physician scientists, so that they're asking different questions and hopefully then more quickly getting to the answers that Dr. Biden alluded to that we all could benefit from?
Well, you probably are aware that 50% of the persons who go to medical school now are women. So there are different conversations that are being held. So it's not your usual, it's not the previous 20 years of conversation, it's different conversations. And when you have diversity in the room, whether it's race, gender, ethnicity, orientation, you are going to have people ask different questions because of all of those characteristics that I just named have given them different distances that they've traveled in life. They've had different experiences. And so they're going to approach questions and solutions differently. And so what we're seeing now is that we are able to have much more thoughtful conversations, and they're not uncomfortable conversations. I always say, you know, menopause is an equal opportunity event. If you live beyond the age of 52, it will, and you're a female, it will happen for you, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do you prepare yourself for it? Knowledge, right? Engagement, all the different things that we put out there that can help you, but hot flushes and all those things are going to occur. And so when we are educating and training this next generation, we're having them thinking about who is that person sitting across from you. Even though they came to you with this chief complaint, you got to have a holistic approach to look beyond their reproductive health and to think about the impact of the changes, the life stage changes that are going to happen, that are going to affect them in a way that may impact their chronic disease. And so we are always teaching a holistic approach to how we educate and train. And I think it's been helpful that we have been able to see more women in medicine because we can have more comfortable conversations.
Because now, what you experienced at the University of Kansas hopefully wouldn't happen today. Hopefully you wouldn't be the only woman or the only woman of color.
Rare. I mean, at some institutions, yes, but clearly we are seeing definitely an increase in the number of women who are participating. Now, we have a little bit of a challenge as you start to move up the ranks and get to, I am the only woman, African-American woman, who is the president of a medical school in this country.
You are the only black woman who's the president of a medical school?
So we got a little bit of work to do.
Yes, ma'am.
There are a whole lot of
Yes,
other
ma'am.
smart women out there who can be in this seat. So that we have a little bit of work to do, but we are making some progress. And so we have to do more development, more opportunities. We have to think more about, again, these life stages. How do women not get penalized when they have a life stage, and one of the stages in life when they start to have kids? And they make a conscious decision that they're going to slow down the pace because of how they want to contribute to the household differently. How do we not penalize them for that? How do we continue to find meaningful ways for them to contribute and be a mom and be an aunt and sister and all the other things that we are, and them to continue to advance in their careers? And so again, having more women in leadership and having more women at the table when we're having these discussions really allows us to create better solutions. And women of color, for sure. Definitely makes a difference.
You know, Dr. Biden, you were sharing how receptive audience has been when you've traveled around the country. I'm just curious, have you heard any stories that you really carry with you as like, yes, this is exactly why we need to be doing what we're doing? Someone who didn't have something diagnosed early enough to get the treatment they received, or researchers who were like, I have so much work I want to do if only I had funding. Could you just share some of those?
No, I hear it all the time. And, you know, women tell their stories. I mean, that's the great thing about women when we get together, whether it's in your book club or at your church or, you know, just out to lunch. So I think most women, you know, I would ask the audience, how many of you have gone to your doctor's offices and come away with more questions than answers? How many of you? Wow, look at this. That's amazing. So Chelsea, you can see how much work we need to do with this, the answers we need to find.
You know, Dr. Montgomery Rice, I was sharing an anecdote with Dr. Biden earlier about talking to someone about our maternal health crisis here in New York City. While certainly our maternal health equity is tragic at a national level, that black women are more than 3 times as likely to die in childbirth than white women, and all women are more than 50% more likely to die in childbirth than our mothers were. Here in New York City, it's actually 9 times. And thankfully, the New York City Department of Health is leading an effort across kind of all sectors, and we at CGI are proud to be part of this effort. But that's a quite serious segue into a somewhat light-hearted but also revealing anecdote. So I went to go see someone that I hoped would invest in this effort, and after pleasantries, he looked at me, Dr. Montgomery Rice, and he said, so tell me about this innovation of midwifery. And I was thinking, well, what I was thinking was, I know
the innovation of midwifery.
That the kind of popular conceit is that prostitution may be the oldest form of labor, But actually, midwifery has to be the oldest form of labor, because where did we all come from? I didn't say that, though. I said, yes, thank you. I'm so grateful to have the chance to share with you about the work we're doing to expand access to midwives and doulas here in New York City.
On that midwifery note, though, I'm an OBGYN. I trained at the Grady at Emory in the 90s. And so the midwives were not my friend, in fact, because we were doing 10,000 deliveries a year, and they had a much more holistic perspective of how they wanted to take someone through the process. Now, I was young and somewhat naive, and after I had my kids, though, I definitely understood that we have to have options for women, right? We have to have options for women, and midwives and doulas and other opportunities for support while you're going through this significant time and this beautiful time where you are bringing another person into the world. We need to have all hands on deck. And when you look at our maternal health crisis, we are not doing something right. And I think it begins with how we are educating young ladies about their bodies and about their choices, how we are intervening early on for them to understand their bodies so that they can be as healthy as they possibly can when they get ready to conceive, that they have choice about when they want to conceive. So birth control and other options are there available for them. You know, this is the 2000s. We're not in the 1900s. We should have choice, and women can make informed decisions about when they want to build their family, how they want to build their family, and who they want to help support them through this process. And then we, in our education and training, are really taking this culture competency and culture humility in the maternal health space to another level, where we are going back and retraining providers who are out in the community. And we're using women's stories because we have so many near misses that someone had pre-eclampsia or eclampsia and they didn't die, but they talked about their experience, or somebody had, you know, gestational diabetes, or someone didn't feel something right and someone wouldn't perform an ultrasound when they just said, would you just take a quick look? We have to listen to women. Women know their bodies better than anybody else.
Yeah.
Even when it's their first time having a baby, there's something instinctive that happens. You know, it could be nature that kicks in, right? And we know these things, and we as providers have to be humble enough, have enough humility to listen to women, and then to try to co-create solutions along the way and learn from those. So we're taking those stories, and this is funded by the NIH, well, not NIH grants, and we're using that as curriculum that we're taking back to providers. And it's in video form, it's in written form.
It's all about education.
It's right, it's about education. And many of them, because sometimes they're so busy and it's so chaotic when you're delivering, like you got two patients. You got the patient, the woman who's delivering, and then you have the baby that you're taking care of. And then you have all the other people in the room who want to take a picture, okay? And you have to manage all of that in the process. And in doing so, sometimes we lose our perspective when things start to go awry. And so what we're trying to do is bring back this culture of humility and competency and really appreciating that the woman knows best and taking that into consideration as we address this maternal health crisis.
That's great. And we know how important it is to listen to women, and yet we also know from now reams of research how often our pain is treated kind of less seriously, less acutely, and that too is exacerbated for women of color.
Right, yes, definitely.
You know, I think what was so evident too, Dr. Montgomery Rice, and I would feel just insincere, candidly, to not acknowledge how much harder we've made it in Georgia, where you live, in my original home state of Arkansas, and in many others, to be able to have safe and healthy pregnancies in the last 2 years. And so while we continue to champion efforts like those that thankfully Dr. Biden has helmed and catalyzed for the Biden administration, and the work that Dr. Montgomery Rice is doing on clinical trials and in changing kind of the way in which we educate not only the next generation of clinicians, but previous generations of clinicians. We also, of course, have to continue to push on the legislative front as well to help protect women so that we can make the right choices for ourselves. In our last couple of minutes, I want to ask both of you about what really is the role of the private sector here in trying to drive more investment into kind of research around women and innovative solutions to help kind of better kind of protect and promote women's health and well-being. Sometimes, those old-fashioned innovation solutions like midwifery, because Dr. Biden, I know something that you're passionate about, as am I, is trying to move the needle from the 2% of venture funding that currently goes to women's health to, double it as a first starting point and then kind of going up from there.
Well, I think, the private sector has, nonprofits, they have a huge role to play. We're de-risking the investments in health through ARPA-H, but we see what works and what doesn't work. So then the private sector can then take what does work and come up with all these innovations. And the researchers that I've seen, we're going to be giving out grants in October. And there's just such amazing work on the horizon. And I think we're going to get there, but it's going to just take some time. And we all of us, government, the private sector, we all have to be involved to make a difference.
And Dr. Montgomery Rice, I think it's appropriate that we give you the last word as someone who's very much on the front lines as a researcher, as a physician, as an educator. What do you want us to kind of take away as our call to action here for trying to help continue to drive more investment into kind of the research around women's health and then to have real responses kind of to those answers so that our conversations are different than the ones that Dr. Biden was referencing earlier, because there will be more evidence-based answers.
So the first thing I would say is that we are all accountable to women's health. I am a reproductive endocrinologist and fertility specialist. None of you got here without a mother. I've thought about cloning myself. It doesn't look like it would be a good clone, though. And so, in all seriousness, we owe it to women to understand that we play a role in how they get to experience life, starting with our young girls, through adolescence, then through the reproductive years, through menopause, and thereafter. And there are many, many questions that we have yet to answer because we have not included women all along the way in the questions that should be answered, the decisions that should be thought of, and the interventions that should be studied. And so that takes dollars. And so just like ARPA-H is coming up with, ARPA-H has one trial that one study that we're looking at in maternal health, and we're pulling in the private sector because there are going to be increased opportunity for resources if we can document outcomes along the way.
Evidence.
And that brings the researchers more dollars. Private equity and other entities, the private sector should be helping to support that. It should not just be the government alone.
No, that's right.
And so my call to action is for all of us to feel and to be accountable to women's health and to think about in your circle of influence where you can help shift resources. And resources are not always dollars. Some of it is time. Some of it is the human capital expertise. Some of it is going to be AI solutions of how we evaluate data sets.
Right.
All of that is really, really important to us moving faster and more efficiently and more effectively in changing the paradigm for women and women's health research.
So
thank you.
We need all of us. Well,
need all
thank
of
you.
us, exactly.
Please give Dr. Montgomery Rice and Dr. Biden a very big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was great.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we thought the two doctors deserved a little surprise. Thank you for a great panel. It is now my honor to welcome a friend of 40 years and an extraordinary leader who spent his entire life fighting to make America better, fairer, and stronger, and to build a world where we have more friends and fewer enemies, where we can all live together and grow together. 3.5 years ago, Joe Biden came to office in the midst of multiple crises. In that time, he lifted us out of an unprecedented pandemic, rebuilt a battered economy from the bottom up and the middle out, and created millions of new jobs. We don't know what the final total will be, but we're sure it will be the most ever created in any 4-year period in our country's history. And he's defended democracy in America and around the world. I personally am very grateful to him for standing by the people of Ukraine. And America will always be proud of that. But he has strengthened our alliances for freedom and security all over the world. And he shepherded the passage of the most significant climate legislation in American history. And especially personal to me, given what we're seeing in America. He and I worked together 30 years ago to ban assault weapons. And as president, he signed the first major gun safety law passed since then. He has bridged divides. He's built coalitions. We had an agreement with the most conservative Republicans in the Senate to control immigration that was undocumented and to properly vet all those who were waiting in line. But it got derailed by short-term politics. I hope you and the American people will remember that. He's provided a playbook for getting things done. So we honor him today, not just for what he's accomplished, but for the way he has done it. Joe Biden has led this country with uncommon decency and goodness and grace, and never allowed personal tragedy to harden his heart, only growing deeper in his humanity, helping others to survive their sorrows, so ultimately they can dream their dreams. That courage and compassion is what has allowed him to advance his oft-stated goal of restoring the soul of our nation. So, on behalf of Hillary, Chelsea, and the entire CGI community, and countless people all over the world who are living better todays than yesterdays because of his actions, I am pleased to present President Joe Biden with the 2024 Clinton Global Citizen Award and reward for everything he has done. And since I'm just an ex-president, I will hold his reward for him while he says whatever he wants to say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. This is what you call being trapped. Mr. President, Hillary, Bill, and when you ran, please have a seat. I'm not going to be long, because I didn't think I was going to be talking about this. You know, I've known the Clintons a long time. I think it's fair to say, Bill, I was one of the earliest supporters of your presidency, because what I saw in you was not an incredible intellect, but a decency that you gave me credit for. It was always about the other guy, always about somebody else. And you and I have something very much in common. We were married way above our station. I'm Joe Biden's husband. He's Hillary Clinton's husband. And you're a great friend, and CGI has actually transformed philanthropy. Hillary, I want to thank you, and I maybe shouldn't do this publicly, but thank you personally for the way you have helped me, the way you've spoken up for me with such passion. I can't tell you. You can ask Jill. Anyway, I love you. I love you. We have something else in common. We have beautiful, very bright daughters who ended up, to their detriment, listening to their fathers and mothers. My daughter is in Philadelphia running. She got deeply involved in the Violence Against Women Act with me. She runs homeless shelter. She's providing housing for abused women in Philadelphia. That's what she spends all her time doing. And I tell you what, you make us incredibly proud. You know, as a point of personal pride, I think Jill's work on women's health research, and this is Jill's idea. I mean, this was Jill's movement that was going to go down as one of the most significant programs in our administration. So I want to thank you for being here, especially Chelsea. Thank you. Dr. Rice, thank you for your leadership. She's on the other way. And most important issue I can say is that, you know, we were talking inside before while we were watching this take place back behind the curtain. My dad used to have an expression. He said, everybody deserves a chance. Just a chance, no guarantee. I mean, as my dad. Everybody deserves an even chance. And the thing that I was pointing out, you know, the majority of women of all the commencements I've done since I've been Vice President and President of the United States, close to 70% of all the valedictorians have been women. And so, folks, thank you for everything. Thank you for supporting CGI. Thank you for what you've been doing. And you know, I remember when I was ill some years ago with a cranial aneurysm, and I was being wheeled down into the operating room, and they had one of these observatories, you know, where all the docs sit up and watch it go on. And before they started to put me under, I said, would all the Democrats please raise their hand? Not many did. I asked the anesthesiologist on the way down, I said, what are my chances? Oh, they're good. They're between, you know, 30 and 50%. And I said, good. After it was all over, we were discussing whether it's congenital, that an aneurysm is congenital or environmental. And he just looked at me and said, I don't know. I was trying to explain to him. I said, just do what you have to do. And he looked at me and he said, you know what your problem is, Senator? I said, no. He said, you're a congenital optimist. I am congenitally optimistic about this country. I really am. We're good people. We really are. We just have to live up to what we expect of others. So thank you all very much, and I'm glad I do that.
Care is what we do when we're at our best. Care is essential to families, communities, and economies all over the world. We have to support caregivers so they know they're not alone.
Please welcome back Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Thank you. You know, I'm thrilled to welcome my friends and CGI partners, Jen Klein, Director of the White House Gender Policy Council, and Ambassador Isabel Coleman, Deputy Administrator for Policy and Programming at USAID, to the stage. Now, Jen and Isabel are leading the Women in the Sustainable Economy, known as the WISE Initiative, which is a flagship effort of the U.S. government to empower women's economic participation and growth while tackling the climate crisis. We've long known that climate change is a women's and girls' issue because women and children are 14 times more likely than men to die during an extreme weather event. Climate change is threatening women's livelihoods, their health, their safety, and threatening to reverse decades of progress toward building a more gender-equal world. But women aren't just victims of climate change. They're also at the forefront of climate solutions on farms, in their communities, at major international climate conferences. Women are leading the way on ambitious actions to mitigate the crisis. Despite their roles as essential drivers of progress, women, however, are chronically underrepresented in leadership of climate initiatives, and women-led ventures receive just 3% of climate capital funding. The intersection of climate innovation and economic growth offers an opportunity to make real progress on both the climate crisis and on gender parity. But if we're going to succeed, we need to double down on our efforts to promote women's leadership and participation in these spaces. And thankfully, we're joined by CGI commitment makers who are doing just that. WISE and its partners are announcing a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action to invest an additional $681 million to support the meaningful economic participation of women and girls in the fight against climate change. You know, all told, WISE's 33 partners have now committed to leverage more than $2 billion to expand women's access to good-paying jobs in the blue and green economies, in climate finance, and in land rights. So I want to make sure that we recognize what a transformational commitment to action this is, because we could not be more excited by it. Now I will hand things over to Jen to share more about what this commitment will do.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton, for your lifetime of leadership advancing rights and opportunities for women and girls. At the start of the Biden-Harris administration, President Biden created the White House Gender Policy Council, which I am privileged to lead. The council is guided by a basic principle, which of course I learned from Secretary Clinton. To address the world's greatest challenges, we need the full and equal participation of women. Tackling the climate crisis is no exception. That's why last year, Vice President Harris launched the Women in the Sustainable Economy, or WISE initiative, to promote women's participation in industries that address climate change. Today, I'm proud to announce that Germany, the Republic of Cyprus, the United Kingdom, Acumen, and Heading for Change are making additional commitments totaling $339 million to this initiative. With their support, as Secretary Clinton just shared, we've now mobilized more than $2 billion for WISE from 33 governments, corporations, foundations, and civil society organizations. We thank our partners for their commitment and call on all of you to join us in this effort. Together, we can defend the future of the planet while building a more equal world.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton and Director Klein, for your leadership. I am pleased to share two key commitments towards advancing our WISE objectives. First, I'm delighted to announce the launch of a new USAID public-private partnership called Advancing Women for Resilient Agricultural Supply Chains. This 5-year USAID partnership with PepsiCo, Unilever, Danone, McCormick, and Nespresso will support women with the tools and resources they need to boost agricultural production, enhance sustainable livelihoods, and improve environmental stewardship. USAID and our corporate partners are here today contributing an initial planned investment of $50 million. Behind me, I am joined by incredible leaders representing the significant commitment from each of our partner companies. Jim Andrew, Executive Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer, PepsiCo. This partnership will further advance PepsiCo's positive agricultural agenda and will support PepsiCo Positive, the company's vision to deliver a more sustainable, people-centric future. Rebecca Marmot, Chief Sustainability Officer, Unilever. Unilever aims to use this partnership to advance its livelihoods and nature sustainability goals. Natalie Alquier, Senior Vice President, Sustainability, Danone. Danone will advance its impact journey, helping expand Danone's regenerative agricultural programs with a strong focus on women's empowerment. Michael Okorafor, Chief Sustainability Officer, McCormick. McCormick will leverage its flagship Women's Empowerment Framework and Grown for Good framework to continue to advance women's opportunities and sustainability in agricultural communities. Julie Renaud, Head of Coffee Sustainability, Nespresso. Nespresso will expand its existing programs, such as its gender learning program, to more countries. Next, USAID is pleased to announce the Skoll Foundation is the newest donor and first private foundation to join our Climate Gender Equity Fund. This public-private partnership also includes Amazon, Reckitt, the UPS Foundation, and the Visa Foundation, and is dedicated to helping women gain greater access to climate finance around the world. A special thanks to Marla Blow, President and Chief Operating Officer of Skoll Foundation, who is with us on stage for making this partnership possible. I also want to welcome 3 of the Climate Gender Equity Fund's newest grantees, the Rallying Cry, Vilgro Philippines, and Alltree Capital, who are with us here today. They're at the forefront of helping women entrepreneurs get the capital they need to deliver climate solutions across Africa and Southeast Asia. Together with our private sector partners, USAID remains committed to supporting women around the world in building a sustainable, prosperous future. Thank you.
The next conversations will be simultaneously interpreted on the headsets provided. For English, please use Channel 1. For best audio reception, please keep your receiver uncovered. At the end of the sessions, please leave the headsets on your seats or return them to staff before exiting the ballroom.
It is time, finally, to make it old news to say that women's rights are human rights. Women and girls are leading the way, and we should do everything we can to support and uplift their work. We have never been more powerful or more committed.
Please welcome Lima Bowie, Yael Admi, and Reem Al-Hajara.
Good evening. I'm Lema Roberta Bowie, 2011 Nobel Peace Prize winner from the Republic of Liberia. So in 2014, at the peak of the Ebola crisis, I got a call from a group of women. Can you come? The Israeli and Palestinian women have started a movement called Women Wage Peace. And we need you to come and give us some advice. I couldn't go, so I sent a video. 2 years later, 10,000 of us walk across the desert, singing for peace, chanting for peace, side by side, Israeli, Palestinian, and every other sister from across the world who had come in solidarity. This continued for 9 years. Yael and Reem are both head of this group. You both are here today as representative of a historic movement to bridge divide and advance peace in the Middle East. Since October of 2023 and the subsequent conflict, your movement could have easily been discouraged. But in the last year, both of you have decided you're going to keep going. You've been recognized by Time Magazine as the 2024 Women of the Year. You have secured a spot as nominees for the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize. Can you tell us about your work and what moved you to continue to forge this unlikely partnership with one another? Me? Yeah, go ahead, anyone. Don't be shy. I know you two can talk a lot.
بداية شكرا لكم ويسعد مساء الجميع. حلو انكم تسمعوني باللغة العربية وبعرف انه في ترجمة. بالنسبة للعمل المشترك بيننا وكنساء الشمس ونساء يصنع السلام ما كانش بالمفهوم الطبيعي. كانش العملية كمان سهلة نهائياً. كان فيها تحديات كثير وكان فيها ضغط، خصوصاً إنه إحنا الشعب الفلسطيني مش سهل إننا نتقبل إننا نعمل مع الإسرائيليين. متهمين بالتطبيع، متهمين بالخيانة، لكن جمعنا صوت واحد اتفقنا عليه، كان هو صوت الأمهات. إما الأمومة هي اللي جبرتنا إحنا كنساء إن نكمل في طريق كثير صعب رغم الحرب اللي بيناتنا. إجمالاً أنا لما بنحكي عن شراكتنا بنحكي عن كثير تحديات، كثير وجع، كثير ألم، كثير خوف. إحنا كثير بنخاف على أولادنا، خوفنا دائماً مبني على تحديات، على الوضع السياسي، كيف ممكن نكمل، كيف ممكن أولادنا يكونوا أسوياء عايشين بكرامة بحرية وبنفس الوقت نحاول نحميهم. وهاي رسالة الأموم اللي إيش ما كانت الأم بعيد عن لون، عرق، جنس، دين، بنتفق عليها إنه إحنا كنساء من حقنا إن ندافع عن أولادنا.
Motherhood, the right to protect your children, the right to forge partnership regardless of. Yael?
Dear Lema, you're asking us about hope and partnership. And actually, you are our great teacher for these two important issues. In every difficult moment, and we have many of them now, we remember what you told us 8 years ago when you arrived to support our March of Hope. You stood on the stage and told us, listen guys, you are taking now the most important role to raise up the flag of hope. But be careful. This role will demand high prices from you. So if someone is not ready to pay the prices, you said, get out now from the room. And none of us left. And here we are, keep going on the March of Hope. Thank you so much. And I want to add about partnership, what you taught us. We devote all our time in strengthening our partnership. And can you imagine, 3 days before the horrible 7th of October, we organized a great event with 1,500 women, Israeli and Palestinian, with big group of women all over the world that came to support us. And there on the stage, on the 4th of October, we said to our leaders, listen, you can't continue, ignore the conflict. You can't hide it. All of us are sitting on a ticking time bomb. It will explode in our faces. You should go to negotiation process and find a mutual, respectful agreement. And 3 days after, that's what happened. And at noon, at the 7th of October, Rim texted me and said, Mama Yael, which is my favorite name that she gave me a few years ago. What's about Vivian, our beloved Vivian Silver? Do you know what's happening with her? I'm so worried. And then she added, the terrible things that are happening now should push us to work with more courage, more vigorously, to promote our common mother's call. And that's exactly what we are doing from that moment. Because we know these terrible days are an historical opportunity to make this awful war to be the last war between the sea and the Jordan River. We have to do it. It's urgent, and it is our duty.
I remember the women, I remember Regina, I remember the joy, but there is still the divide. In Liberia, we had the Christian-Muslim divide that we had to overcome. How have you navigated this divide? How are you convincing people that this is real? Rim talked about all of the negativity. How do you navigate all of these things? How do you convince people that we can engage and we will continue to engage? Rim, you want to start?
Yes. برجع بحكي إنه مش سهل علينا إن نقنع مجتمعاتنا بعد كل الخراب اللي عماله بيصير خصوصاً بعد 7 أكتوبر. كان المجتمع الفلسطيني أو المجتمع الإسرائيلي مش سهل إنك تحكي له كلمة سلام. كأنها صارت وصمة عار كلمة سلام. بس إحنا قدرنا نخترق قلوب الأمهات والآباء. إحنا لما بيجي بيصير في نوع من التحدي بيننا وبين أي حدا، بحكي له أنا ابني بدي أحميه. كأني أنا بسقط كل القوانين، كل الأعراف، كل العادات والتقاليد عند هاي الكلمة. أنا أم ومن حقي إني أحمي ابني، أحمي أخوي، أحمي نفسي حتى. إحنا كمان كنساء معرضات للخطر في كل لحظة. الوجع اللي جوانا اللي عمالنا بنشوفه كل يوم هو أكبر إشي معطينا الدفعة للأمام إنه لازم نعمل إشي. بناء السلام في مجتمعاتنا كان كتير مهم. مليارات الأموال دفعت من أجل الحروب، بس ما اندفعت من أجل السلام أو بناء السلام على الأرض. كتير مهم إنه العالم يساعدنا في هاي النقطة، يدعمنا إنه كيف نحقق السلام في مجتمعاتنا بالأول. إحنا كتير محتاجين لسلام داخلي في قلوبنا، نتحدى الصعوبات والصدمات اللي دخلناها، وهذا مش إشي سهل. وقفتي جنب امرأة إسرائيلية بالنسبة للعالم عار، بس بالنسبة إلي أنا قوة لما أنا وياها بنتفق على لغة واحدة، إنه كيف نوقف الحرب، كيف نوقف دائرة الدم، وإنها هي تتعامل مع ابني كأنه ابنها والعكس صحيح. أنا بالنسبة لي هاي القوة.
I respect what you just said, because most times people tend to think that women peace building is all kumbaya. And Reem has just said to us, standing beside an Israeli is not an easy thing, but we have one language, and that's the language of motherhood. That's the language of peace. And I think this is a message that we should all take from here, that regardless of how difficult any kind of conflict is, we must find a space for our collective humanity. What do you say to those who say, Yael, this is not real?
I learned from you what to say. And I want to explain a few things about women power. Is it okay with you?
Mm-hmm.
So at that event on the 4th of October, among the supporters arrived also the Irish ambassador. And she stood on the stage and asked us, do you know why our conflict already solved and yours not yet? Because in our conflict, there were women around the table that led the reconciliation process, the negotiation process. And in your case, there are no women. And you know what is our secret? You know, but I'll tell to the men. I'm sure that all of you want to know what is the secret of women. So I think that the first and the important thing is that we don't need to win anyone. We know that in wars, there are no winners. We're just looking for sustainable solutions that will take care of the complexity of life, the multidimension of life, and will bring solutions that all the participants will feel that they got the empathy, the patience that they need. That's what we know to do. But our strongest power, as Reem said just now, is our determination, our consistency, our devotion, because there is no power in the world that will stop mother to prevent the life of her children.
I like what you said. There are no winners in war. And in order for us to build peace, we need empathy. In order for us to go across divides, we need to see the humanity of each other. You all talked about women participation. Let's just say we are living in an ideal world where we don't have to keep pushing that women need to be around the table. Reem, if you were around the table, what would you be saying? If you were participating in a negotiation, what would you be saying?
اشعروا فينا بالأول. كتير مهم إنه نكون مش بس جزء من المفاوضات، كتير مهم إنه يشعروا في الوجع تاعنا. إحنا كأمهات كل يوم نفقد أولادنا، بكونوا في المستشفيات جرحى، أسرى، مخطوفين. إحنا بنتألم، مشاعرنا مستهان فيها، وجودنا كمان كنساء مستهان فيه. أنا كامرأة فلسطينية وأكثر من نص المجتمع الفلسطيني نساء، ضروري أكون مشارك. أنا لما بشارك في طاولة المفاوضات ولا مرة بقبل إنه يكون في حرب. أنا دائما راح أقبل إنه يكون في سلام عشاني وعشان أولادي.
Around the negotiation table, my decision will be for peace and not for military action. Yael, what will you bring to that table?
I think that the best thing that we can bring to the table is our ability to build trust. And that's what we are doing in everyday life. You should see both of us speaking this morning, maybe the most intimate and personal conversation with Google Translator that enable us to express our feelings and to feel so close, even though our situations in life are so different.
Yeah.
But we feel we are the same. And I think maybe this is the biggest secret that we can bring to the negotiation tables. The ability to look each one on his own life, on his own needs, on his own narrative, to give the empathy, as you said, to take in consideration his needs. That's the way to make peace.
The UN Security Council Resolution 1325 calls for protection, participation, and the prevention or protection of women. Prevention, protection, participation. And for years, next year is going to be 25 years, and people always ask, are women more peaceful than men? And the two of you just really nailed it by saying, it's not that we're peaceful, but we have more empathy. We can build trust. We can bring the human factor to the table, and that is what is needed in a divided world. Thank you so much for putting that beautifully for all of us. So we're about to go, and I know how difficult it is to do bottom-up peace building. Many times people see the two of you on stage, you're cleaned up, you're made up, but none of us know the backstory, the pains, the silent tears, the frustrations, the lack of funding, the many telephone calls and the many no's that you get. So for the audience here today who are looking at you to clean up nicely, who sees your cooperation and partnership as an example of people-to-people diplomacy, because that's what I want to call it, how can they support you? How can we support your specific mission? How can we more broadly support more women participation in this process of people-to-people diplomacy?
So thank you
I will
so
take
much.
it to you, Rael, and then we'll give Rim the last word. We're counting down.
Thank you so much for this important question. We believe that hope is not something that suddenly arrives in the sky. Hope is something that you have to work for it in the real life, and that's what we are doing. And in these difficult days, our main mission is to enhance our common mother's call. And each one of you can help us, because we need as strong as possible international support. And I invite all of you to get inside our new common website, the name motherscall.org. And please add your support to our joint request. And I'm so excited to use this distinguished stage to make the first unofficial announcement about our next project. And here it is. We are beginning to build a group of prominent women, key figures like you, that will come and support us and will help us to spread the word and maybe come to our region and to make us make peace. And we are doing this project with the amazing organization, Vital Voices.
Rim,
and we know it's time for peace, it's time for women. So please help us. And also the men that can connect
quickly
to their inner mother voice are most welcome.
Rim, we're out of time, but let me give you a moment to say anything that has pulled at your heart.
أنا من قلبي في كثير كلمات ممكن أختصرها بكلمتين، إنه إحنا كنساء فلسطينيات كثير محتاجين للحرية، كثير محتاجين للسلام، كثير محتاجين لكل صوت يوقف معنا عشان نصل لهاي المرحلة. شكرا.
Peace, freedom, democracy. And Yael was ashamed to say, because women are always ashamed to say, please go to their website, donate, 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 because women building peace is not rice and beans, it's hard work. Thank you all so much.
This session has now concluded. Thank you for joining us. Please leave your headsets on your seat as you leave the ballroom.